Hey there, everybody. This is Anne, and welcome back to Reaper Pro Tips. This is our last day for a couple, as I am off tomorrow and Monday. And apparently, Reaper is undergoing an ice apocalypse right now, so nobody's actually at work. So I feel like I'm like the only person working. Although, you know what? Ed will be there. If he has to mush in a dog sled, I swear Ed will get to work. So hi, everybody. How are you? I am tired. Yeah, it's true though, Quindy. Like, days off don't exist for Ed Pugh. Like, I don't think they do. He enjoys too much, and I get this because I kind of enjoy it too. When you come in on a day where everybody else is gone and everything is so quiet and you can get a ton done because nobody is bugging you. Yeah, I think Ed really appreciates those times, and so it seemed like if there was a day off, like I would maybe come in and check on something, and Ed would be there. He would be there. So totally, there are no days off for Ed Pugh. Unfortunately, all he would have to go over to Dave's house to get dogs to hook up to the dog sled and mush. So hey, everybody, we have a Centaur, and I decided to go like with kind of a standard color. We're gonna do an appaloosa, so we're gonna do a blanket. But underneath that, I decided to go with a simple bay because, and bay horses are the brown or reddish brown horses with the black socks. And sometimes they also have white socks over their black socks because they're two separate genes. And with the black mane and tail. So I decided to go with that, mostly because it gives us a lot more options as far as what colors we want to make other things on the mini, since we're going to be starting out relatively dark. That leads us to make the other stuff up here lighter, which is going to help to attract attention to those parts of the model, which you could argue are the most important. So yeah. Plus, I just like bay horses. I think they're pretty. So I'm going to back up one and make sure we're in focus. And then I'm going to go over this model real quick. I did look at it, but I want to make sure I've got mold lines off of it. But yeah. Yes. And I am not feeling great today, thanks to, my guts. So this may be a slightly shorter stream. We'll see how I feel. I wanted to do it, and this gives you an idea, by the way, how easy it is to use a knife to scrape off at least shallow mold lines on bones. You get those little threads on your knife, but as long as it's not a big honkin' mold line, I find that removing mold lines from bones is actually pretty easy. At least with this new generation of bones. And the Centaur might be a bones black. I'm not sure. He's the right color. And the material kind of feels like a bones black. And I think we did kind of a combo, right? For this Kickstarter. But I don't remember what was what. Yeah. Yeah, my guts have been acting up just a tiny bit over the last 3 days, and then last night it struck big time, so I did not sleep well. Which always sucks, because I depend really, really a lot on getting good sleep, like many of us do. I am just gently taking off just this tiny, tiny, tiny mold line on the stomach, just because it's going to be very evident if we don't. Sometimes you can get away with, if a mold line's really, really shallow, you can get away with it if it's on the underside of something and it's a gaming model. But on a big rounded surface like this, where we're going to be trying to blend and get that shape to kind of be reflected in the highlights and shadows, I would definitely spend some time taking off that mold line. So as I was saying to people who only just came in, I am gone tomorrow. I am gone Monday. I will be back Tuesday. And the other thing I was saying is that we're going to go for a bay color on this horse, which is the brown or reddish brown with the black socks and black mane and tail, because I'm going to do a white appaloosa blanket over his hindquarters. It'll also make the appaloosa part really show up because we'll be doing it against a dark background. Yeah, and this mold line is a little bit tougher right here on this leg because it actually brought up a little bit of pitting here. So it's not as easy, and it's a harder angle to get at. So we'll do our best. This isn't a situation where I would probably use putty because I've got a hard to reach mold line that's leaving an artifact there. Ah, expansions were done in Bones Black. Yeah, it feels like a Bones Black. Yeah, this is one of the models I've wanted to paint from the expansion since I saw it. I like centaurs because I like painting horses. I like painting animals in general, as you all know. So I'm just going to take off most of the mold line. This is one where you could probably put some sealer on it or some primer to fill that little divot. So I may do that actually and put some brush on stuff through that. You can use a thicker sealers and primers to fill in very slight pitting or issues with a sculpt. Just look on the rest of this. Usually there's a line down the horse's back leg. Just very slight. And I'm not looking to clean this guy up perfectly. I just want to get the big issues out of the way, or they will bother me later. And nobody wants to be bothered later with mold lines. Let's face it. As it is, we always see that. All right, so that's good, that's good. The belly here needs a little bit of a polish. Yeah, there's Ice Apocalypse at Reaper, I heard. I remember Ice Apocalypses. They were actually kind of nice when you had everything you needed and you could just like huddle inside in the warmth. And one more little mold line on this horse leg, which is very hard to get at. So I'm actually going to come in underneath the axe. Sometimes you have to be inventive in how you get at some of these angles. And I think that might be good. A little bit of mold line here. But yeah, you really, with Bones Black, like, I find the mold lines come off very, very easily with a knife. So as you can see, it's very simple. And I just don't like, I don't like files on most Bones material because they'll make kind of a texture on the surface. Bones USA are kind of the exception because they're more like styrene, but even there, I tend to like to use my knife to remove. There we go. Just get most of that off. I think we're good. Let me see if he's got anything hiding up on his helmet here. I think he looks pretty good. The mold line, I think, is going down the middle of his mane, so that's pretty good. Yeah, I think that'll work. I don't see anything on his torso. There is a bit of fill to do here, where this arm has been glued on. His torso is pretty solid, though. It's mostly this arm. We've got this big gap here. So I think, actually, do I have any green stuff around here? I do not know where I stuffed my green stuff. I probably stuffed it right back in the freezer where it belongs to keep it good. But I'm thinking, well, I can still paint the horse parts, though. I have my paint mixed up for that, and I'm going to grab a primer real quick and fill in that tiny little hole right there. And then we can at least put some paint on the horse parts because the putty work I have to do is up here on the arm. I think we'll save that for the next time. Yeah, freezing rain up at Reaper too, Twisted Oma. This is what Quindy told me. Reaper is closed today. I am going to mix up my paint a little bit here and make sure it stays good for while I'm filling in this gap. we go. Excellent. So the colors I'm going to be using starting out are pretty much walnut brown and ruddy leather, and then a mixture of both. Because walnut has so much black in it, though, I'm using about 4 drops of ruddy leather to 1 drop of walnut here to create this dark brown color. The dark brown color is a lot like blackened brown, but sometimes the pigments can vary a little bit when you're mixing. Like ruddy leather has slightly different pigment mix than black and brown. So mixing these two gives you something that's like black and brown, but a little bit off. It's something that I know is going to work with ruddy leather because I mixed it from it. So that's why I would mix instead of just going and reaching for another paint. This is one of the benefits of mixing is you can pretty much make anything go with anything, as long as you mix an intermediate stage. Hey, Majorusa. No Reaper Live tonight because everybody is hunkering down in the ice apocalypse. Yeah. So I am your programming, folks. And if the ice apocalypse is really bad, this might be the last Reaper programming for the week. All right, I'm going to get some of this primer out here and put it over here. So primer, MSP primer is very, very thick. So usually when you use it as a primer, I recommend thinning it about 4 or 5 to 1. You could go 6 to 1, although I find that I like it to self-level. For here, I'm just going to apply it to fill in this hole, which is its other purpose. Like it can do this. Sealers can do this too, but I actually find that primers are more efficient in actually filling in a hole. So I'm just going to brush it over the top of this, kind of feather it off into the... So it's nice and thin off to the sides here, so I don't leave artifacts and brush strokes. Kind of just thin it down. I'm going to grab and actually get some water on my brush and feather out the outside edges of this. Just because I don't want to leave like globs, other than where I want the glob. Oh, Crafted Creative will be on. Good. Yay, I'm not the last programming. Alrighty. So I'm letting that just kind of sit and fill that in. But I can work on the back of the horse while we're waiting for that to dry, especially because there's this nice, the cinch around his middle means that I can work on all of this area back here and not worry about kind of like leaving a dry edge, because it'll go right up against here, so I don't have to worry about blending it in. Normally, if this whole thing was just one area and I didn't have this to separate it, I would actually wait until this was fully dry and filled in before I started on the horse. But here, this cinch makes it very easy to just stop here and paint the rest of what's back here. So I'm going to go with my mid-tone. I find that ruddy leather is a great color for bay horses. I just really like it. For a reddish bay anyway. So here I would start around this inch and I would work backwards. And I would do one side of the horse and then the other. And as you can see, ruddy leather and walnut both have fantastic coverage, so no worries there. You can see how liquid this base coat is. See? I just talked about this on my top 5 tips for new mini painters about getting a smooth base coat and how important it is to thin your paint for that. You don't want to lay down the paint and see brush marks ever on your base coat. You want a smooth coat. Even if you have to put 2 smooth coats on, 2 smooth coats is better than 1 choppy, glumpy coat. So nice, and see how liquid and smooth. And what that means is that that paint is just flowing together. Like wherever I dab in a new dab, it's just going to all flow together and become a seamless coating, which gives you the smooth base coat. I would say this is thinned probably 4 or 5 to 1 paint to water. Also, having this much water in it and this much paint on the model means you have lots of time to work and fill in all these areas and then connect it all up underneath before it starts to dry. I'm just going to do everything in one color except for the tail, obviously, since I'm using that as a hold on to. I do need to put this guy on a handle, but I wanted to wait until I had all the cleaning done on him before I did it. So we'll just block this in and then we'll get a handle for him. Happily underneath, it's easy to reach stuff here because he's rearing up. So I just put a dark base on everything to start off with, and then we'll work it up from there. Walnut brown and ruddy leather and a mix of the two. This is the color, this color is a mix of the two. It's 4 drops ruddy brown, or ruddy leather, sorry, 9109. And you can see the color there. And then 1 drop walnut. Primer, brush on primer. Waiting to see if that fills it in or if I need to put one more layer on there. It's still drying right now, so I don't want to try it. I can see the wet, the shiny right over that spot where I globbed it on to fill in that pit. So I am waiting probably for another couple minutes while that does that. And meanwhile, well, since we're also waiting for the model to kind of dry right now, I am going to grab a handle for him. Let's see here. Oh dear, this sticky tack. It is aggressive. Obviously, I need to mix some less sticky tack into the sticky tack from on this holder, because it is really sticky and it's ripping out. When you get little threads and stuff, a lot of them, you know that your sticky tack is really, really sticky. And mixing in a little bit of something that's a little less sticky, like mounting putty, is a good idea. Because blue tack out the gate sometimes is really sticky. And so I've got a lump here where you can tell, because it's grayer, the one over here, it has mounting putty in it, because the mounting putty is actually kind of a beige color or a gray color. So if I take a little bit of this, which is already mixed with some blue, but it's a lot stiffer, and so I can add this to that and kind of cut the stickiness of the blue. Like, you can tell that I've already mixed some mounting putty in there, because here's the base blue. This is straight up blue tack, and it's very, very sticky. So I mixed some mounting putty in, but then it kind of like didn't quite go. So now I want a little bit more, because I want it to be sticky enough to hold the model, but I also want it to not like stick in strings to the model when I pull it off. Everybody is late. Everybody's late, yes. It's ruddy leather and walnut brown. Everybody stop and look at the people who just came in. Pull the college professor thing on you. We're doing a bay horse with black socks, and then probably with some white socks over the black socks. Since the black legs on a bay and a buckskinner, you know, it's a separate genetic trait, you can still have white socks over the top of that. I always thought it looked pretty cool. So I'm mixing these two putties just because I don't want that rip out, really goopy putty. So I'm hoping that this amount of less goopy putty will cut this enough. Plus I need this anyway to get it nice and smooth so that the model will stay on the plinth nicely. Once you have it stuck down, obviously you can just like leave it there. But when you're just about to put a model onto a plinth, you need your blue stuff up, your blue tack or your poster putty. And just like silly putty, it'll get softer as you need it. And then you can really squish the base down onto it nicely and kind of curl it up around the edges of the base is what I like to do, just for a little extra strength, depending on how heavy the model is. So I'm going to spread this out. And I'm going to grab him and kind of check, and that's close. I need a little bit more. We're doing this while we wait for our base coat to dry. Oh, yep, we're doing Appaloosa. We're doing a blanket. Well, don't paint along live then. I always thought it was kind of silly to paint along live with me, because I know that sometimes I move really fast. It's probably better to do the VOD, because that way you can stop me and back up and relook and stuff like that. It's always nice to have control of making Anne shut up when you're trying to finish a part, instead of her zinging along to the next thing. All right, so I like to take this and kind of push it up around the base, which will give me a little extra purchase action. And it's true that then I won't be able to just paint that. I'll have to peel the putty away from the base to start painting the rim of the base here. But I might be putting this on a circular base and building up putty around the edges anyway for this model. So I'm not going to sweat it if I can't paint the edge of that base, because I may not be painting it at all. And even if I was, I could just peel this off when it came time to do it. But I just like having that little extra strength. But that's why I wanted this to not be a real stringy blue tack when I came and to put it on here. Because if it's really stringy, then it becomes a nightmare to pull off. Finally finished the spreadsheet from hell, Quindy? Well, grats on finishing your spreadsheet from hell. So you can see that I still have a lot of wet paint on this model. So I'm thinking the blanket's going to be across the hindquarters, but I'm going to go ahead and paint with some of the red brown. And I'm going to take my walnut, my pure walnut, and bring down the legs, the lower legs. 1 second. So again, my colors here are walnut brown, ruddy leather, and a mix of the two, 4-to-1 ruddy leather to walnut. And I did want to check this and see if I needed a little bit more. I might need a little bit more primer on that. Now I was using this primer straight up, but at this point I am going to stop and kind of put a water barrier around it. What I mean by that is I'm taking a brush full of water and I'm putting it all around the outside of the primer. Why would I do this, you think? Well, because primer is really hard to get off your palette once it dries. But if I put a water barrier around it, I can still grab full strength primer from the middle of this blob while keeping the outside rim from drying. It's just kind of clever. See? Full strength primer. And I'm going to pad this in here a little bit more. I'm going to take some water and thin this out. And down below. So I'm taking some water to kind of pull the edges of this primer out so that it blends in. So I don't get any chunky blobs. The UPS guy brought dog food. Oh my God. Dogs are like, but wait, it's the UPS guy. He's evil. But wait, he brought us food. All of the dogs' little heads just imploded. Again, I'm just taking a little bit of water and I am feathering in the outer edge here to make sure it blends in nicely. That layer should do it for that. So I'm going to start kind of highlighting this and shading. Let's put our socks on. Our socks and our tail. So I'm blocking these in walnut because walnut is a near black. And if there is nothing else on this model that is actually darker than this walnut, then it will read as black. However, I probably will mix in some blue or something to kind of like cut the brown signature of it to make it look more like black. Like I might put some blue liner in the shadows or something. And that's totally a trick you can do if you don't want to use pure black on a model. As to why you wouldn't use pure black on a model, very little in nature is pure black. It exists, but often painters will feel that it's a little bit, at least the pigment version of black is too dead to the eye. It's usually lamp black. Yeah. And lamp black is really just carbon. So it's pretty dull. Doesn't have anything interesting about it. Painting something with black and not doing anything else to it pretty much tells the human eye to not care about what you just painted. Because it won't attract the eye at all. So any details will be completely lost unless you highlight. And when you do highlight, if you don't introduce other colors, you will essentially get something that looks very unnatural. All right, so we've got, and you can see how that tail actually, if I remove this black base, the tail looks black. Like you can't really tell that it's a dark brown, especially next to this. I can tell in person more that it's a dark brown, and now if I move the black base in, now you can see it's a dark brown because you can see the contrast between the pure black and the not pure black. I'm going to start building up the black legs on the horse. They usually go up to the hock, as I recall. Depends on the horse. I do have my horse book that I could look for some examples in if I wanted to. Or I could just type bay horse into... Let's see here. Where is bay horse in my image search? B-A-Y horse. Images. So they can be quite light. They can be very reddish, which is more like what I'm going for on this one. And as you can see, they have long black legs. And usually or just over the hock and over the knee, it looks like, with all of these. I always thought it was a very pretty color. And you can have a dark bay, which is a very dark brown, which is kind of what we're doing right now, although we're going to build it up. But, you know, the brighter bay is pretty coveted. That's a really pretty lighter bay color. You can see here, this one is actually a great example of what I said about highlights on horses being almost metallic. See that? See how it kind of like shooing... Because the hair is so short, it almost comes off, when it's really shiny horse and a really short-coated horse, it almost comes off as metal. Like it's really kind of cool. But not really, because you can see that it's more doing what hair normally does, doesn't it? It's doing like a mid-tone to a highlight to the highest highlight, and then it goes down again. But you can see that there's a little bit of a harder shadow on the underside than there normally would be, and that's what gives you that super shiny. Here's a really super shiny one. That one's definitely had photoshopping done, but it shows you where the highlights go on horses when the light is right. But yeah, so very, very pretty horses. Yeah. And you can definitely see that they often have white markings on their face. And of course that's not applicable here, but white on the legs as well. So let's take this dark color up. And over the hock, which is that bone right there. Ooh, that's exciting, Thoramel. Yay. What did you get? Do you want, if you want to share. If you don't want to share, you don't have to. I keep thinking that like I should be in the market, but for a new car because mine is very old, but I like my Element a lot. Still have some wet paint. And you can tell it's definitely cold in this room. It's taking a long time for paint to dry. You will notice that when it is warmer, everything will dry a lot faster. And if it is cold, and that includes if your AC is really turned up, AC can kind of counteract it because air conditioning also dehumidifies. So it makes things drier. Sometimes that can counteract the fact that temperature is making your paint not want to dry as fast. And we'll get the one on the inside here. Yep, it's Ice Apocalypse Mistim. Oh, a Subaru. Nice. Exciting. Exciting. I was less curious about Subarus. Probably looking at Subarus and Nissan when I replace the Element. But the Element's just such a good dog car, and I'm about to have a dog again. And it still works, so why would I blow money on a new car, right? I swear, I'm just going to drive it into the ground, and then I'll be like, oops, it's time for a new car. Oh, nice. Yeah, my Element is a little bit younger than yours, HM. Yeah, it has been my favorite car as well. Mine is a 2008. Like there are gonna be people out there like with their Element, like it'll be considered a classic car at that point, but it'll be the Element they've had like their whole life. I think that's the fan club for this car. Apparently the general manager at the Honda dealer out here is a huge fanatic about Elements and like they were canceled, but they were one of his favorite cars. So whenever an Element comes in, he has to run out and take a look at it. Mine is in pretty good shape. So still a little bit of wet paint on the inside here, so it's going to be hard to make it darken down. So I may have to back off and do some highlighting on the muscles here. Yeah. Yeah, I hear I've always heard good things about Subarus. I do love my Honda. I've had David's got a Honda Fit and I've got a Honda Element, and we've both had, our cars are old and they're still running great. So I'm going to look at my horsey references again because I want to look at highlights. So because this horse is really like rearing up on his muscles, you have a lot of tension on the muscle sculpt here that you're not necessarily going to see on these horses that are running unless I can find a good angle. That's a pretty one. I really like these where it's like brighter gold, like on the face and underside, where you get those beautiful highlights. Let's see here. That's a little bit more like it. Big crease underneath and more a depression here. So really, and that's reflected light, I think, up from the ground. It's hard sometimes when you're looking at photographs, it's hard to figure out where your highlights should really be. But I'm going to go with my gut. I'm just going to look at this. Notice that you've got a big broad highlight kind of going and defining the belly here, for example. So let's do that. And you usually have kind of where the horse changes direction. You've got this cool, funky little V highlight there, where the hair changes, can change direction and hit the sunlight a little bit odd. Same here, you can see the line of light kind of going there. So yeah, it's interesting. Horses can be challenging to paint if you try to like do the highlighting that precisely. But you can also just generalize it. And we will be bringing this horse up like a fair bit as far as highlights. I started dark, but I do want to work it up. So I'm going to start just blocking in my ruddy leather. And I am going to use a brush stroke in the direction the hair is growing. So the hair tends to come out and down. So it's kind of going straight over the dorsal, and then it kind of goes at an angle off to either side. And as it sweeps down this way, it goes down that way. So it won't matter this early in the painting process, but I like to get in the habit of just always painting in the direction the hair is going so that I can see it. You can start modifying it once it's paid off. She's smart. So I know that there is musculature here, and that there's going to be a highlight coming down here. And as we start bringing this in, you can see the red tones really start to come up. Now, for the bay, to get it to like some of these colors we were looking at, I'll start bringing it up with more gold color. Like this is what chestnut gold used to be great for. So we may use Griffin Golden Brown and some Palomino Gold to get some lighter bay color on this horse. I do want the undertone of red. You can kind of see, though, if you look at the overhead lighting here, we can see exactly where that highlight goes. Remember that little V of light? See it? You can even see it on the sculpt. Here's the one part of the V, and here's the other part of the V. So that kind of lets you know, like it is a good sculpt. Like when you notice, like, highlighting areas that you see on a photograph, and then you see the same thing, you see exactly where it is on this. That's pretty cool, I think, on a sculpt. The one thing I could wish is that this crease wasn't so deep. It should be actually a little more shallow, but I'm not going to sit and like nitpick about horse anatomy too much. Horses are not easy to sculpt, so. So as we bring up the body more, the legs are going to look darker and darker. I almost want to grab some white and block in like that V highlight and others, but I'm going to not get ahead of myself. And I'm going to leave the underside of the leg dark here because, as you can see, it would be, since the horse is kind of rearing back on his hocks. The light's going to come from above. It's mostly going to hit the knee here and the musculature, and it's not going to really get back here except for bounced light. So there may be a little bit of a highlight. Yeah, Sandy actually had horses, I believe, and so she was very, very good at horses. Sometimes I think like it takes that interest to become like that interest in animals and love of animals to become a really good sculptor of animals. Like I can tell that Andy Pieper really loves the dogs he sculpts. So layering up and getting those rich red tones on this guy. Again, if I put the black base under there, you can see the color a little bit better. So that's really coming up red now. And now we can go back over here and we can do the same thing. Once again, I am a little tired and didn't have a great night, not feeling great today, so I may end the stream a little bit early. And I will not be on tomorrow or Monday or Saturday, my normal stream. I'm going to be visiting my mom, so. Get the knee, bring the color up on that. Makes a big difference, but these colors are close enough together that it's easy to blend them, you can see. Even though Ruddy Leather has a great coverage, since we're using colors that have each other mixed in, since our base coat is Ruddy Leather plus Walnut, and then we're going up with pure Ruddy Leather, even though the Ruddy Leather has great coverage, it's still like giving us a great blended look because it's over a color that has a lot of its own, color in it, and that isn't that different. Now, one thing that bays often have is they'll have a dark dorsal stripe, so don't forget that. Bays and buckskins can have this dark stripe down the middle. If you pay attention to a few little details, your horses can come off. You can like level up in realism on your horses without like doing too much extra work. Like many teenage girls, I really loved horses when I was younger, and so I learned a lot about them. I took riding lessons for a short period of time. Never stuck with me because there was no way we were keeping a horse, and also they were really big, and I liked dogs better. Experience with various horses taught me how unpredictable horses could be. Just like with dogs, they have different personalities and temperaments. There we go. Just little brush strokes all in the direction of the fur, Kerniko. And see how much of a tip I have on my brush. It's really fine tip, right? So I am unloading my brush a lot. And the paint is not thinned that much, because I wanted to get my first coats built up pretty fast on this, so. There we go. And if you feel like you've got a little bit of a sharp demarcation, you can grab your base coat and feather it back in underneath. Or put some of that down and then bring in your highlight and do a little bit of a wet blend while it's still wet. There's that V again. There's that highlight there, catching the light up here, and then this. So once again, on a good horse sculpt, it'll show you where your highlights should go. So let's actually try to bring this up a little bit more. I am going to grab some Griffin Golden Brown. If you have the old chestnut gold, that is also acceptable. You can use leather brown 9030, but it will dull your color. So if you want that really rich bay color, you want to use something without as much white in it. Where is my Griffin Golden Brown? Do I have it out here? I do. Yeah, I think that'll be a good... This is very close to the old chestnut gold. So I'm going to do, again, a mix. Since I want these colors are not part of an established triad, so to make them go together, I need to do a 50-50 mix, or at least a little bit of one into another. So to start out, I think I am going to do a 50-50. I'll do 2 drops of Ruddy Leather, and then I'll do 2 of Griffin. All right. So there's that half and half. I'm going to throw about 3 drops of water in it. So that'll be about a 2 to 1. I actually went 3 and 3. and see what kind of color I get. Yeah, that's pretty good. It is quite different at that point from the ruddy leather, so I may actually grab a brush full of it and transfer it back to the ruddy leather and do one more layer with this, with a little bit of that griffin in it, and then go straight up to the half and half. I'm going to pull this back out of here so that we can actually see the color. Let's see how different this is with a little bit of griffin in it. It's probably just going to be a little bit more orange, a little bit warmer. See it there? A little bit more yellow. So now if I want to keep a lot of my red tones, I'm going to have to start shrinking my highlights a bit. And I'm also going to have to concentrate my highlights where they would be. So moving my horse over here. Yeah. Going to bring in a little bit of this up here to kind of test it out. This will bring it up a lot less red, a lot more into the orange range. Very shiny. And I've got a big block of light here. Got a little bit too much paint on my brush because it's leaving puddles. So I'm going to actually go back the other way. Remember to always unload your brush. Unload, unload. Unloading the brush is the great secret of getting great paint jobs. When you have very little paint on your brush, you can control it. If you have too much paint on your brush, it's going to do stuff that you don't want it to do. I'm feathering my base coat over my highlight here to blend it in a little bit. Again, I'm still going in the direction the fur would actually grow. Now I'm not going to do a ton of work on the back here because I do want to put a blanket over this horse. So actually, why don't we map that in? I'm going to do the highlight on the other side here, and then if I still have enough oomph in me, then I will kind of map in the shape of the blanket that I want. So I should do a quick Google search for that. Let's see here. And images. So yes, we've got, we're not doing that. More like this. More like that, kind of like really striking. There, sometimes it goes over a bunch of the horse, sometimes it goes on the head and the rump. So yeah, that gives me enough ideas. They call it a blanket, maybe. There we go. Yeah. So more like this. In this case, Dragon, I just really wanted to start the horse first because I wanted to get all these values down before I figured out what colors I wanted to do on the rest of this guy. So in this case, since I was waiting for this fill to dry to fill in a gap down here, I decided to start on the rear. But often I will start on like a skin tone. Although this follows a different rule. So the inside out rule says start from the skin tone and paint outward. So then skin to hair to clothing, inner clothing to outer clothing to cape or whatever. But another rule that people often follow is paint whatever is taking up the most of the model. And that definitely is the horse in this case. So this would follow that rule. I personally don't necessarily follow a rule. I do tend to start with skin. Just because I usually want to figure out what skin color I'm dealing with first, because it'll influence every other color on the model. But yeah, I often do the inside out painting Dragon where I start from the skin and then work to the hair and work outward from there. Especially on busts, which are definitely, they've got a lot of skin on them typically, or they can. The skin is a real focal point because the face is a real focal point on a bust. So we're bringing in, I need to remember to bring my base in so we can see this a little better. A little bit more of this, bring in those kind of orangey color. Yeah, Dragon, it really doesn't matter. Although one could argue that if you have a strong idea of a particular color you want to paint a particular part of the mini, start with that. And if you don't, then start with skin, because the choices you make about the strong colors on the model are going to influence a lot of your other color choices. At least as you get better at painting, you'll find that if you start by knowing, like, you're like, oh, I want to paint this model purple, that's going to inform like kind of the rest of the decisions you make. Because it's like, oh, well, then the hair should be X or Y, and, then these other colors could be, B or C. And sometimes if you choose something weird, like say a blue skin tone, that's going to severely slam a door in your face as to what else you can do on the model. Like going with an off-colored skin tone, it really closes off. It can get you in a color corner very quickly. Because then the skin almost invariably at that point becomes a focal point of the model. And then you've got to play to it. You can't just ignore it and paint the rest whatever you want. Not and have it look good. That's why I encourage people to do color wheel a lot, to figure out like what their overall scheme is once they have an idea for their first color before you even put paint on a mini. Though you certainly could, start with your first color and think about it while you're putting paint on the mini, but the painting will generally go faster if you have a plan. We got that really pretty, rich, almost mahogany color coming up. Yep, brush strokes are entirely the thinness of the paint and having a good brush, Dogfather. It's also unloading, because you'll get, even with thin paint, you'll get brush strokes if you're not taking enough of it off your brush before you put the brush on the mini. But it very much is in general, brush strokes will come from thinness of paint. And, that'll be different for different colors because like we were talking about, the Ruddy Leather here has a very good coverage. A paint that's more transparent, doesn't need as much thinning to get, to not see brush strokes as much. I'm seeing brush strokes here, but I don't mind that I'm seeing brush strokes here because, hold on. See if I can get to the point where you guys can see it. Yeah. So I'm getting brush strokes here, but I don't care because I've been moving my brush in the direction the fur is growing. So any brush strokes that are seen are just giving texture at that point. that's why it's kind of important, why I encourage you guys to think about this when you're painting animals, and always be painting like in the direction the fur would grow, because then you don't have to worry about blending. Like if you get a little bit of extra texture, it'll just look like you meant it and it'll look right. So, oh, bye Thormel. Alrighty, got that. Let me get some white, but I'm not going to start with white. I'm going to start with a different color. Let me look at my photo references. It is pretty stark. Like, but there is some, see the color variation here where some of the red hairs are mixing in with the white? Kind of giving you that off-white. And there's a bit of gray. So I think I want to grab like my red and like my mid-tone and my highlight and mix a little bit of white into them to start with this. So I'm going to grab a brush full of that, the base coat, and then a brush full of the more reddish first highlight. I'm going to say a drop of like an off-white. Sadly, my bleached linen is in the other room hiding. I could go with Osirian sand, but I kind of feel like I should go more gray. I think I'm just going to use Cairn Stone. So I'm going to use this guy and see how it works, how it does. Because you don't want to go straight up to white right away. The white is going to be your final highlight on this fur. So maybe I should do a Patreon video on brush strokes and how to avoid them. Although I think I've talked about it a bit on the VODs for the bust that we've been painting on Pro Tips, the Storm Chaser bust or whatever she is. Fairweather. I can't remember. Can't remember which one she is. What she is. Sorry, I found a mold line. All right, let's see here. Let's mix this up and see what it looks like. Yeah, you might want to go look, because when I did the skin tones for this dog father, I think I talked about, like I showed at various points, like, oh, this is too thick because I can see the brush stroke, and, you know, adding more water for those skin tones and stuff. But in general, yes, brush strokes are related to your paint. Yeah, that's about the right color. So the same color as I was seeing. So we'll start with that. I feel like I might want a little bit more yellow in it. So I'm going to grab my Osirian sand. But I might just do that coming up from that color. But yeah, with acrylics, it's just, if you don't want brush strokes, it's very thin paint. Very thin paint, very good brush with a good tip, very little paint on your brush. It was Cairn Stone, Ruddy Leather. I just grabbed a couple of, like a brush full of my Ruddy Leather Walnut mix and a brush full of the Ruddy Leather, and threw it over and threw a drop of Cairn Stone into it, just to create a light color that kind of looked like this right here. So the first kind of patterning, like where it's almost roan, right? Where you've got white hairs mixed in with the bay. That's a very close color to what I just mixed. So, and yeah, I would have maybe used bleached linen, but I had Cairn Stone to hand, so I did that. So let's see here. There's a lot of speckles that come in on the outside, which is interesting. It's not just a blanket. A lot of people paint on a solid blanket. So I want to look at where it comes, and I maybe want to start just kind of, that's a lot of paint. See how big puddles those are? So watch. Just take some water, rub it off, say, no, not fine enough. And that's because I thinned this down a lot. So when you thin down your paint, your brush is going to want to suck up a lot of it, and you're going to have to unload a lot. So I'm going to dip a bit of the brush in, just a tiny bit. See that? About 1/3. And then I'm going to unload. And because this has an off-white in it, because Cairn Stone counts as an off-white, it should still And what you can think of as you're starting to speckle this in is think about when we do maps for D&D, think about a shoreline. That's what you're doing. You're like doing all those little, that irregularity is like a continental map, like a shoreline, except with more speckles, like with lots of tiny islands coming off of the mainland. So when you're doing this type of appaloosa thing, think of it like that, but leave some of your dots. So we're going to start filling it in to get kind of a pleasing and irregular surface. But you want to leave some dots. You should have your Cairn Stone on your desk like I do. Now, what I will do probably is paint this color over most of the back solidly once I've got that outline. Again, always using brush strokes in the direction that I want them. I'm going to leave the outside of the blanket. Leave those speckles. I'm going to come back and re-add the dark spots when it comes time. Right now, I just want to kind of get the feel I'm looking for here. Bleached linen works. Now you can really see my brush strokes here, and that is because there's a lot of white in this paint, and I didn't thin it down all that much. So remember, the hairs kind of go straight back as they get back here, and they kind of fan out. So you've got that dorsal stripe, and that's where the hairs part. That's where the parting of the hairs is. You can still, if you really want to, you could keep kind of a little shadow there if you wanted to, or not. I'll leave it for now and then maybe deal with it later. Hey, Roger, thank you. 18 months. Wow, it's a sub-and-a-half anniversary. I'm going to, again, do like speckles. Speckles and dashes. Remember, think about the continent that you drew for your last D&D game. This is the shoreline. Do that. You can start to fill in things more or less. Remember to leave lots of little speckly islands offshore. Just using a real fine stipple here. And filling in, again, with the way the hair is growing. So there's our start of our blanket. We can always bring it down more if we want it to cover more of the rump. Right now, what it is serving as is an interesting, kind of for the back of the model, it'll be kind of interesting to have those spots there. Too much paint then. Too much paint, too thick. Too much paint on the brush. Although it is kind of a strawberry milkshake color because of the roan. Now, as you continue to fill this in, you'll start shortening your brush strokes. I use these really long brush strokes to start with, but as we know, horses have very short coats, at least when they're not in winter coat. So as you build up these levels, you make much shorter brush strokes. Like little tiny dashes. now is when, if I want to extend this a little bit more, I can do so. If I'm like, I want this to go a little bit further down, I could do that and just speckle it down a little bit further and then fill it in. See how much lighter that, because we're building up on this color now, how much lighter the color is getting. It's okay that it's a bit pinkish. We'll probably go up to something like Osirian sand to give it more of a white or cream appearance after we've got this base laid down. Too much paint on the brush. Part of it is not dipping a lot of your brush into the paint, and part of it is taking your paint off the brush. And if you ever see, like if you put the brush stroke down and you see a little puddle, you've got too much paint on your brush. Take more off. You want to be able to just see little lines without a puddle. The puddle is useful for when you're trying to do blends, but when you're trying to do kind of this fur texturing stuff, it's not as good. And when you've thinned your paint down like this, it's going to want a puddle. Like that's kind of the thing. Like I said, when doing smooth blends, you actually want a puddle. But when we're doing this sort of precision work, we don't really want it. So I'll be filling in this space with little tick marks, little tiny dash strokes to break up the long lines that I used as my initial fill of the pattern and make it look more like fur. And I'll continue with that kind of little brush stroke ticking as I kind of fill in this dorsal area. Maybe leave a tiny bit of stripe, but I'm going to bring it way up first. So you can see the hair direction here. You can see it coming out straight and then kind of going off to either side. This is a big enough model that you can do that texture. Going to build up a bit more here. And I think I may call it soon. I'm not feeling great. But when we come back to this model next time, we will continue to build up the white. We'll go up from this like kind of washed out pale pinkish brown, and we'll build up to the actual white and dark spots. Meanwhile, remember, you can continue to fill in these little areas on the side. Leave a little bit of ticking meaning the little tiny spots. There we go. That's pretty good. I like the way that this looks. It's maybe a little bit too regular, so maybe I'm going to expand this a little bit out. It's a little bit better. would say this is a pretty good start. It's giving us guidance as far as our boundaries and parameters with the color pattern. We're getting our hair direction established. And the hair direction is important on this because this needs to look like it's blending into the rest of the coat. Like, because if you get close to an appaloosa, you can see how the hairs change color as you get close. And so I'm going to be continuing to use like the brush strokes to blend the coat into the dapples and to blend the dapples into the coat. This is technically also the way you would do a roan or a dapple gray, but it would be a lot more work because you'd be doing it over a lot more horse, a lot more area of the horse. Because technically this color is what comes up to like be what they call strawberry roan or gray roan sometimes. But for people who don't know, like, who aren't used to looking at horses, it can look weird. So the appaloosa is a good way to kind of sneak in practicing this technique on a smaller area of the body. And then if you like it and you feel like you're really, it really is cool and fun and you enjoy it and you think it's coming out great, then you can maybe consider doing something more crazy like a dapple gray or a roan. Or a more body blanket appaloosa where it goes over a lot of the body, puts in more speckles on other areas. We could still do that with this guy if we wanted to. We'll see. We'll see how it looks. Yeah, it always does happen right before you go on trips, right? Where you start not feeling well. After all this time where I've been feeling great. But that's chronic disease. So, yay. Many of you already know. So yeah, so let's call it there. So we're setting up an appaloosa pattern on this Centaur. Should be fun and cool. I'm really liking how it's coming out so far. We're using ruddy leather and walnut and a bit of Griffin golden brown and then a bit of a Cairn stone. So I will pause and write that down for this model right after the stream to make sure I remember what I was using since we're working on so many different models. But yeah, I'll be back on Tuesday and we will be working on Tuesday on hair folk. Maybe we'll finally give her eyes. Yes, and Crafty Creative with Josh Foreman at 2 p.m. USA Central Time. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Sorry I had to end it a little bit early, and look forward to seeing you all on Tuesday. All right? Have a good one, everybody.